Sussan Ley, welcome back.
Lovely to be here, Sarah.
Of all the places in the world, why a Greyhound bus?
Something I've had in my mind for over 20 years, and not just a Greyhound bus, but a Greyhound bus down the wide, brown middle of America. A road without a story, without a song, without a view, and with a lot of sketchy and strange characters accompanying me. But it was broader than that. When I lost the leadership and went through the inevitable ending of 25 years in public life, I knew that I needed to find my own voice, to slow down the interior noise, and to I wanted to listen to the heartbeat of America, slow, long, and contemplative, and to do it in a way that noticed and observed without judging or concluding. And that's what I did.
Put us on the bus with you. Who did you travel with? Who was there along the way on the bus?
A range of different people. So in some states you get a ticket to get on the Greyhound if you're homeless and the state wants you to leave. There were some returning prisoners. There were some nuns. There were veterans. There were many assistance dogs. I saw very, very few children. There were people whose lives were in transition and disarray, and that's what struck me from the moment I got on the first bus, because there's several buses to get from the top of North Dakota to the bottom of Texas. But it's hard to describe the expression on someone's face that comes from a lifetime of being overlooked. And when I sat next to people and saw them in their most unguarded moments, the gap between what they hopefully looked into a future with and the reality that gradually settled on them was apparent. And what I mean by that is that I was often in awe of the dignity and the humanity of so many people that I travelled with. We didn't necessarily say much, but I saw what they were carrying, and I admired them for being able to just get through the day. And I'm talking about people who are, physically struggling for a range of reasons, putting their battered suitcase in the hold and then getting on the bus with a whole lot of what looked like bin liners with their stuff in, just huge plastic bags, and just sort of shoving them and then sitting there with these bags on their lap for hours on end. As I said, I learned a lot, and it taught me a lot about human nature and the human condition, which is why I want to write more about that and talk more about that.
Were you there to discover yourself, or only to observe others, or both?
I was there to, as I said, sort of quieten the noise in my head. Politics, party politics is all about someone else's voice, and that's not a criticism, that's just how it is. It might be the media cycle, it might be the risk matrix, it might be the party room, but I very much wanted to speak in my own voice and find what that was, and not represent anyone else with my words, my thoughts, or what I said, but just observe. Because I didn't go to America to become an expert. I went to America to look, as I said, to notice and to quietly write.
Did you tell anyone who you were?
No. If people asked, yes, but vaguely, in a way that, was, and anyway, no one was particularly interested. But I met a lot of people off the bus who thought I was completely mad to be on the bus, and I made myself walk into a bar or I've taught myself as an MP to walk into the front bar of any country pub, so I did that in America, and I was quite surprised that women travelling alone tended not to do that.
You're talking about travelling with the vast American working class for the most part. What did you learn about those people, and particularly how different it was to what you'd seen in Australia?
Just the disconnection really was quite confronting. So I expected, as I travelled, to still see that clenched fist sense of pride in the US, in the flag, in the identity of the country. And I've got to be honest, I didn't see that. It doesn't mean it didn't exist in people's hearts, but I didn't see it expressed. What I saw was incredible disconnection. I saw disconnection as a human condition rather than a political constituency. And people were simply not interested in the institutions and the organisations that ostensibly are there to represent them, to look after them and to be there for them. So if you look back over history, you see the public in America and obviously around the world engaged, active, angry. What I saw was just an incredible stepping back and disinterest.
You write about that. I enter and leave every town the way that's reserved for people with the least privilege. Do you think that politics has failed to understand what that is to be a person of the least privilege?
I think politics has, and I think it does so at its peril, because the person sitting next to me for 10 hours on an overnight from Omaha across West Nebraska has the same democratic weight in terms of their vote as the wealthiest and richest person in America. But that can't somehow be seen, and it can't mean anything, and it doesn't seem to matter to that individual.
Were you lonely?
Sometimes, yes. The feeling of, walking from the hotel to the bus station was a great feeling, but sometimes at the end of the day it wasn't such a great feeling walking back. And, I went into bars, speakeasies. I sat there. I sometimes struck up conversations, but sometimes I didn't. So there were moments when I felt as invisible as the most invisible person on that bus.
Did you like that or not like it?
Sometimes I liked it, but sometimes it felt a pretty huge thing to come to terms with. But I also knew that there was a political self-reckoning for me, and I went through that process, and it was about finding clarity, and I did find clarity.
And what did that look like?
That the way people see the circumstances of their lives in their own words is more important than almost anything else. And I wanted to be part of describing that, as I said, in a way that presents it rather than advocates or has a solution. But this feeling of disconnection I found by the end of the trip really quite interesting, quite fascinating, and, it's sort of the next stage of what I want to do in this area.
And when you're looking at yourself, because of course, as you say, you're also there because you've been through the trauma of losing that position, how did you look at yourself as a politician and someone who had lost the leadership? How did that look from so far away?
It looked very remote, and while, I dealt with the effects of burnout, it didn't bring me undone. It allowed me to move to the next chapter of my life, which is where I am now. So it's allowed me to draw a line very conclusively under those 25 years in public life and move to this next chapter where I know that I will have more to say, more to write, and more observations to make. But obviously I want people's thinking to be provoked by what I've seen.
You quote the Buddha and Joe Strummer, the great musician, as inspiration, and particularly Joe Strummer's insistence on telling the truth. What's the truth that you learnt about yourself on that journey?
That the most important journey you ever make is the journey that you make inside yourself to understand who you really are. And when you know that, you need to confront the world and what it has made you with that truth.
Any regrets about how you'd been in the past?
I'm actually not someone who has regrets. It's not to say that I don't acknowledge the things that I did wrong. Of course I do and would continue to. But there is no point in relitigating something that has happened in the past. And if I think about my time in politics, I'm proud of what I achieved. I don't dwell on it because I'm very much focused on the next chapter of my life.
You're sitting on a Greyhound bus listening to a pretty great playlist. It's a lot of punk, a lot of bands from that period, that great anti-establishment welling up in British and American music. Were you always that anti-establishment character? Did it just sort of go into abeyance in politics? Is it back?
Well, punk is all about the truth, and that is the defining theme of the punk ethos, and people can make it about many other things, but for me that's what it always is about, a fearless, honest belief in yourself. And the trip helped me to find that.
You end your journey in Texas, where Spanish is dominant, where people of Hispanic heritage are in the majority. Of course, we're in the middle of a big debate in Australia about multiculturalism. One Nation has been arguing that Australia's future depends on the policies of assimilation, including through language. Is multiculturalism dividing us?
I'm a huge supporter of the Australian Multicultural Project for the simple reason that we have been able to achieve multicultural Australia not by erasing people's differences, but by giving them space to belong. And I think this is something we should all be incredibly proud of. Now, I'm not a political commentator for the US, but I didn't see communities melding together like I see here. In fact, I saw different communities from different backgrounds sitting very uncomfortably alongside each other.
So One Nation's got it wrong?
I'll leave the political commentary to others, but I come back to my point about disconnection. And disconnection I saw as a human condition, not a political constituency.
Did you find what you were looking for?
Absolutely. But of course I'll still keep looking.
And just come back to that, at its heart, there's a lot of very famous people who've done these trips, and obviously famous writers. When you think about the reason that you left, the reason that you went from Australia to America to make this journey, if you could encapsulate what it is that you were looking for?
I'm going to quote Mick Thomas, a great Australian songwriter, a wider sky, a broader smile, a thinner truth.
Sussan Ley, as I said, welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you.